If you know anything about Berserk and you have even a shred of morality in your heart, then you know that Griffith has done plenty of things that can't be summed up with the word wrong. He's a man who assaulted a woman he saved from assault, thought that guts was basically his property, and literally reshaped the world just to make himself king. But is that really the full extent of Griffith's ambitions? Is he really the kind of person who would stop at sitting on a throne, even if all his actions seem to be geared towards that goal? Well, we don't think so, and neither does Guts, who knows Griffith's sick and twisted mind even better than we do. That's why, in this video, we'll be taking a look at Griffith's darkest ambitions and talking about how getting a crown is the first step in his ultimate plan for not just Midland, but all of Earth. Is being king the sum of Griffith's ambition? To begin answering the question we posed in the intro, we must first ask, is being king the sum of Griffith's ambition? And the answer is, it was, or at least initially. While the introduction of Griffith's character took place a couple of years after he'd become a God Hand member, Griffith himself was introduced as an ordinary man with an extraordinary dream. In a world where death had become meaningless because of religion and constant warfare, and where even kings had no say or control over their fates, Griffith wanted to know how he would fit in with the true elites. He once told Guts that there are those who, regardless of their status, background, or resources, make the world function the way it does. They are the true keys to everything, the golden elites, and his purpose in life was to find his place among them. This belief is what drove Griffith to pursue his dream of becoming king, which is something he thought of when he was just an orphan boy. Griffith would often play with the rest of the orphans in his hometown and collect junk and trinkets to mark his victories in those games. But one day, he laid his eyes upon the castle on the hill that overlooked the entire city, and it was then that he decided that acquiring that junk was what he would dedicate his life to. Griffith knew the task would be impossible to accomplish given his status as a common-born orphan with neither wealth nor an army, but for a man who has nothing else, a primary motivation can often become a dream, and because Griffith is the kind of guy to obsess over something until he finally has it in his hands, he worked tirelessly to make his impossible dream a reality. He started off small, enlisting bands of thieves like the group that Corcus worked with before he became a Falcon to essentially become a caravan raider. As he worked his way up through the mud of obscurity, he attracted other people to his group by charming them with his intellect, ingenuity, and most importantly, his dazzling vision for the future. Despite not having any sort of meaningful resource to his name, Griffith had two things that most men don't know what to do with: charisma and confidence. He was supremely confident in his ability to acquire those very things that other commoners, like the members of his band, could only dream of acquiring, and he used his mind to achieve goals you and I can only think of as being impossible. After raiding the caravans and wagons of noblemen all over the West, Griffith had a sizable enough group of men under his command that he could now transition to being a mercenary. And that's exactly what he does, creating the Falcon symbol that would go on to become his battle standard and dubbing his former group of thieves and ragtags the Band of the Falcon. He trained in the art of swordplay to the point that he became the best swordsman the group had ever seen, at least until Guts joined up with them, and after gaining a certain amount of credibility as an undefeated mercenary leader, he compromised on his own morals and slept with a wealthy employer to substantially increase funding for his warband, and eventually he found a kingdom that had all the right conditions for him to hit the next level while maintaining his reputation as an extremely effective military commander. After Guts joined the Band of the Falcon, Griffith knew that he had the perfect setup to finally enlist the Falcons under a major kingdom and make a play for its throne because he had an unrelenting, loyal-to-a-fault killer in Guts. It got to the point that Griffith started organizing his plans around Guts to accommodate his impromptu decision-making because he knew that the rewards for doing such a thing would outweigh the immediate cost on the battlefield. The kingdom he chose was Midland, which was going through a political and succession crisis like no other. Locked in a century-long conflict with the Tudor Empire after losing one of its most crucial fortresses to them, Midland was in desperate need of a capable military mind that could turn its fortunes around. The kingdom's high command was filled with highbrow nobles who placed more value on their nobility than military tactics, and Midland had lost literally thousands of soldiers trying to reclaim just one castle. Plus, the king of Midland did not have a male heir. His only child was a 16-year-old girl named Charlotte. If the king were to die, his throne would have passed to his brother and the general of Midland's highest-ranking army group, the White Dragon Knights. After Julius, his son Adonis was next in line to the throne, so technically the king's line of succession would have passed down to his brother and his brother's family, disinheriting the entire lineage that got him on the chair in the first place. This problem could have been resolved in a couple of different ways. The first was to unify the two branches of the royal family through a marriage between Adonis and Charlotte. This was what Julius wanted because it would have made his son king and kept the bloodlines pure. The second way was to create a male heir, obviously, and the king of Midland could have done that at any point during his life. After the death of Charlotte's mother, he did get married again, and his new wife came from a prestigious family who could have borne him as many sons as he wanted. But despite the fact that they'd been together for several years, the king never got with his own queen, and that's because of his secret incestuous feelings for his daughter. This is a fact Griffith picked up on and could have used to bargain his way into becoming the next king of Midland, or at least the king consort, because that's the third option that could have preserved the royal bloodline. The king crowns his daughter as queen and marries her to a man willing to work with her to build up the power of Midland. This would have preserved his lineage, and although he'd have to introduce an outsider to the family, as long as it was someone good and focused on achieving the same goals as the royals, the king should have been fine with the match. The third option is most likely why Griffith chose to sign up under Midland, despite the fact that it was on the losing end of the 100 Years' War, because he knew that if he could get them back on top, they'd be indebted to him, and he could leverage that to finally fulfill his lifelong dream. For a while, Griffith was playing things by his book and making rapid progress on the kingly front. The first numbered chapter of Berserk literally opens with him being the answer to the king's plea for a person who can save his kingdom from annihilation, and because of that, Griffith is raised up from a common-born mercenary leader to a noble viscount of the kingdom of Midland. He strategically eliminated every enemy he had at court, including those who would hinder his marriage prospects, whilst coming up with a plan to recapture the fortress that sparked this century-long conflict in the first place. Griffith would have become king in no time had he actually practiced restraint and stuck to his own plan. After winning the 100 Years' War for Midland, he was acknowledged as the kingdom's hero and savior by the commoners, and their support is extremely important for a ruler to rule effectively. He had Princess Charlotte practically eating out of his hands after charming her with his rural leaf whistle trick. He even managed to get rid of both Julius and Adonis, leaving Charlotte as the only viable successor to the throne of Midland. And after his accomplishments on the battlefield, especially during the Battle of Doldry, he was given the rank of the White Phoenix General, essentially replacing Julius's White Dragon Knights as the new premier army of the Kingdom of Midland. In the course of just a little over a decade, this orphan kid, who didn't have a penny to his name, had managed to acquire status, a wanted background, and enough resources to last him a lifetime. However, he would throw all of this away just because he couldn't stomach the fact that Guts had the quote-unquote guts to leave his service and make a choice for himself independent of Griffith's influence. He didn't realize it at the time, or rather his ego didn't let him see it, but Griffith had come to rely on Guts as more than just his star soldier. He included Guts in his dirty assassination plans, which ended up scouring the Midland royal court of all those who would oppose Griffith, and he himself admitted that this was due to the fact that he saw the two of them as kindred spirits. "You're rough enough to share this kind of thing with," is exactly what Griffith told Guts after he killed the queen and her followers, who were his biggest roadblock to ascension. And even after Guts left him, Griffith refused to acknowledge the dynamic of friendship that had developed between them, opting to let his superiority complex dictate the terms of his life. His original goal to become king was really close at hand, and he threw it all away by seducing Charlotte and sleeping with her carelessly. And after he was discovered by the king's men, Griffith dug his dream's grave himself by antagonizing the king while being his prisoner and exposing his incestuous feelings towards his daughter. When he did that, any chance of Griffith ruling in his own capacity went out the window, because in that moment he lacked what any good king should have a natural instinct for, which is the art of diplomacy. Griffith could have talked his way out of this predicament and used his knowledge of the king's perversions to his advantage. Instead, he chose to throw it all away to satisfy his own ego, and after being tortured into insanity for over a year, even his dream of becoming king started fading away within him. It came back for a few moments following his rescue by the Griffith rescue team, and was in fact the primary driving force behind his triggering of the eclipse, but once he became a member of the God Hand, ruling a kingdom was no longer the extent of his full ambition. Yes, it was what got him started on his path, but kingship wasn't what he aspired to after he entered the abyss and emerged from it a new demon god. Once Griffith realized the full extent of what he could do as Femto and had a conversation with the god of the abyss, he changed his mind. What is Griffith's new goal in life as a God Hand member? As a God Hand member, Griffith's existence goes well beyond his formerly mortal ambitions. The God Hand represents all the beliefs that make a human do unspeakable things to other humans. For instance, as Femto, Griffith is called the Blessed King of Longing because longing is the emotion that he is a manifestation of. Longing is the unspoken desire for something or someone that's so strong that it'll drive you crazy if you don't do anything about it, and that's exactly what happened to him. His longing for a throne and guts ended up turning him to the dark side permanently, and Griffith was reborn as a demon god with the power to reshape the world. This is where we feel like we need to talk about something rather important to understanding who he is today, because there's only one moment where we see Griffith humbling himself and accepting the words and thought process of another, and that's when he meets the idea of evil in chapter 83. There's a reason Miura removed this chapter from the official continuity, because it really does give away too much about his plans for Berserk's finale, and also it explains Griffith's new existence and new goals in life a bit too plainly. So what happened in this deleted chapter? Well, it essentially boils down to two things. The first is that Griffith realizes his entire life has led to this moment when he's talking to what is probably the only real godlike figure in all of Berserk. And the second is that Griffith takes up the idea of evil's deal that if he just does whatever he wants to, thanks to his new powers, he'll be able to keep soaring higher and higher in a sky without an end. That's actually one of the lines that convinces him to sacrifice his friends as well, because even before Griffith makes that decision, Void sells him on the idea that being a God Hand member will allow him to fly. If that castle from your dreams still dazzles within your mind's eye, then pile up the corpses, chant I sacrifice, and you shall be given raven black wings upon which you'll soar through the heavens. This is a crude recreation of that exchange between these two demonic figures, but it also reveals Griffith's new goal in life quite plainly if you know how to look. Before, he was just focused on acquiring a single territory and being content with changing things the conventional way. That would have taken a lot of time, but time is something Griffith believed he had, for he had patiently waited for his moment in the sun for over a decade before joining up with Midland. As a mere human, it would have taken him years, if not his entire lifetime, to consolidate power and expand his territory even to just a couple of adjacent kingdoms. But as a God Hand, Griffith can take over and rule everything with a single fleeting gesture. The God Hand is part of the human subconscious, for better or worse. It has subtly guided humanity towards the path of evil for over a millennium, and even during the main story, we continue to see their influence on the disenfranchised and disillusioned. They've created heretical cults, brought about plagues, sent misleading prophetic dreams to people, and made an entire army composed of literal demons. The God Hand members are the de facto leaders and deities of the apostles of Berserk, and it takes several puny humans or one pissed off guts to kill even one of them. If they're not mortally wounded, they can effectively live forever, and forever is a keyword that explains Griffith's new ambitions. In the deleted chapter 83, after learning that his entire concept of free will was nothing more than a myth, Griffith decided to become an agent for the idea of evil, and the first thing he asked for from his new god, without hesitation, was a pair of wings. Thematically, the acquisition of wings represents human hubris. It's the classic story of Icarus. Everyone wants to fly, not just to get a feel for the wind, but because they can look down on the world and feel above it, and that's exactly what Griffith wanted for himself when he asked the idea of evil for wings. He already believed he was above most human beings because of his personality, charisma, and all that he'd achieved as a mere commoner. In chapter 49, we see Griffith's internal monologue, which is quite rare in the grand scheme of things. Miura-sensei made it a point to avoid showing Griffith's thoughts because he wanted the main villain of his series to be enigmatic. If we have access to what Griffith thinks about the world, we might empathize with him too much, and the storytelling goals that Miura-sensei had set for himself would have been ruined. Of course, that doesn't stop the Griffith did nothing wrong camp from justifying his acts, but it might have been worse had we gotten his internal monologue on top of all those absolutely gorgeous panels of him showing off his locks and abs. And we get proof that Griffith thinks he's better than everyone else shortly after he accepts the idea of evil's deal when he assaults Casca just to show Guts who's the real boss. All of this to say that following his rebirth, Griffith shifts his goalposts from being just a king to emperor of the world, and to that effect, he lays the groundwork by ensuring more apostles are created during his time as a God Hand, and by moving events in such a way that he returns to the physical world with all the power he didn't have the first time around when he made a bid for the throne. That culminated in the Incarnation ceremony during the Conviction arc, where, after a massive ritual sacrifice, Griffith was able to obtain a body of flesh and bring his God Hand powers to Earth with him. He started posing as the Berserk version of Jesus and used his abilities to liberate Midland, but he didn't stop there. If Griffith's goal had still been to simply become King of Midland, he could have defeated the dread Emperor Ganishka in 100 different ways. He could have married Charlotte a lot sooner instead of opting to wait things out until he got the Pope and the Holy See on his side. Instead, he allows Ganishka to absorb massive amounts of abyssal energy so his body becomes completely saturated with the power of hell, and then he uses the space-cutting sword stroke from Skull Knight's Sword of Actuation to trigger the Great Roar of the astral world, which reshapes the physical world on a fundamental level. Griffith returns Earth itself to a state of Fantasia, which existed before the fall of Supreme King Geiseric's Empire of Man, and he proclaims to his new counselors that his agenda is to build a second, better Empire of Man. He brings in a lot of admittedly cool social reforms, which you can check out from his council session in chapter 358, but his real agenda is hinted at through the eyes of another important Berserk character, the great guru Gedfring. When Guts reaches Elfhelm, after a long and arduous journey plagued with monsters and sentient pirate ships, he meets Gedfring, who, like Flora, seems to know everything about everything. After Guts explains who Griffith was in the past to him, Gedfring says that it's pretty unsettling that just to get a throne, Griffith remerged the physical and astral worlds. He then asks Guts what he thinks Griffith will do now that he has all this power, and Guts simply says that Griffith will keep flying higher because that's who he is. And what this statement truly means is revealed to us when a short discussion regarding the nature of the world spiral tree takes place. The great gurus explain to Guts' party that spirit trees act like anchors that tether the physical and astral worlds in specific locations. All spirit trees draw their spiritual energy from the world tree itself, which makes them parasitic in nature. This serves a dual purpose within this universe. It disperses power so it cannot be concentrated in one person's hands, and it prevents the world tree from running rampant throughout both realms to keep them stable. However, ever since he returned to the physical world, Griffith had been systematically eliminating each spirit tree that wasn't the world tree, because he wanted sole ownership over the spirit tree forest. This forest had been nearly reduced to ashes even before Guts and co reached Elfhelm, but with the destruction of Skellig Island and its massive cherry blossom spirit tree, now there was no way to keep Griffith's power in check. Presumably, the only spirit tree that exists now is the world spiral tree, which stands in the middle of the courtyard within the Falcon's castle, and this gives Griffith what he's wanted ever since he asked the idea of evil for wings: complete and utter superiority over all things in existence. He'd already started his little spirit ascension ceremony before triggering the Great Roar, because he knew that if he wanted to keep his human subjects blind and aloof, he'd have to prove that he was on their side physically, mentally, and spiritually. To that end, he allows the families of all the soldiers who have fallen in his service to speak with their spirits one last time before they move on from this mortal plane. But what he doesn't tell them is that he's actually sending all of the souls he reaps from the fallen straight to hell, where they become a part of the ever-growing, ever-churning tornado that is the vortex of souls. He does this because if he were to be honest about his plans, his own subjects would stop believing in him, and belief is a key component when it comes to magic and Berserk. While he maintains the outward appearance of a benevolent king who wants to uplift all members of society, claims to be working for the people, he is in fact penning them up in Falconia because he wants to subjugate all peoples. The fact that the Falcon's castle is even more massive than the city of Falconia itself should have given that away to you guys, but if it didn't, the fact that he's sending all of his followers' souls to hell really should. Griffith's new goal isn't just to rule the world, it's to control existence itself, which is why he's kept the world spiral tree under his control while eliminating all other spirit trees entirely. If he's in control of the only place on Earth that's safe from the monsters of Fantasia, and the only spirit tree that makes traversing through the astral world's shortcuts possible, then he controls all aspects of existence within Berserk. And that's not all. Griffith has put forth a rather utopian vision for Falconia to his counselors. He wants to start mass education programs, include refugees in the military, start up an orphanage, and just generally do things that are quite commonplace in the modern era. You can tell that Berserk is a medieval society when his counselors push back on mass education, especially because back then, knowledge was wielded as a weapon and not seen as a basic human right. But Griffith manages to sweet-talk everyone into letting him do what he wants because he says that this is all for the sake of Midland's prosperity, and that in order to survive in this new world, they'll have to thrive instead of trying to survive. He doesn't tell any of them that he is the root cause for monsters attacking Falconia's borders, and in fact, he proposes that they clear out monster nests, they build infrastructure that will allow him to deploy his military forces quickly while building walls around everything to ostensibly keep the monsters out of their borders. But the truth, as we've discussed in other videos, is that he just wants to pen all the humans into Falconia, most likely because he has another mass ritual sacrifice in mind, and this will not only increase his power, it will also allow him to populate Earth with people he can control on an instinctual level, aka the Apostles. Humanity, for all its faults and flaws, laws, knows one thing better than any other species, and that's the necessity of freedom. Griffith knows that he can only keep up the Berserk Jesus appearance for so long before someone within his camp figures out his true nature and starts a revolution against him. But apostles, because they're bound to the God Hand on an existential level, cannot rebel against them even if they wanted to, especially if they're close to a member of the God Hand, because that's when their instincts kick in and they become powerless to do anything but revere these deific figures. If the world is only populated with such beings, then Griffith will have finally achieved his true objective, which is to be in absolute control of absolutely everything. Moreover, if the apostles are actually corpses that are reanimated by the power of evil, as was suggested by the Berserk prototype, then there's even a possibility that Griffith could expand his influence to other planets or solar systems. We thought it was kind of an odd artistic choice for Miura to draw the Earth from the perspective of the moon when he was showing us the sheer scale and scope of the Great Roar, because we'd already figured that it was a worldwide event. But when you consider the fact that Berserk's biggest demonic ceremony uses celestial alignment as a secondary trigger mechanism, and factor in the mutterings of the fortune teller who saw what awaited Rickert at his rendezvous point with the rest of the band, and the possibility that Berserk could go interstellar rises from 0 to at least 1%. And a 1% chance of conquering planets is more than enough for Griffith to explore the possibility of doing such a thing, because he almost beat worse odds back when he was a human. Like we mentioned at the top of this video, his dream was impossible from the beginning because he was common-born, and common-born men only marry princesses in fairy tales and fables. Yet Griffith came real close to making that fairy tale reality until he had his Icarus moment. This would explain why he has an entire squadron of flying demons being led by his strongest apostle and right-hand man, because if they need to move through space, wings would be pretty useful. And if the astral world's influence isn't limited to just Earth, then that explains everything with regards to why Griffith wants to be in complete control. He's preparing himself for the ultimate conquest there is, the conquest of the unknown. And for that, he'll need an army that has inhuman endurance levels, aka the apostles. But even if our theory about Griffith taking his demons to space is wrong, everything we said before that still stands. And it goes well beyond his original intent to simply rule over a single kingdom. Becoming the king of Midland is most definitely inferior to becoming the lord of all things in existence, and that's Griffith's new dark ambition in life. Marvelous verdict. But that's just our opinion, and you guys know that opinions make opinion out of you and I, or, something like that. Still, we'd love to know what you guys think about his darkest ambition yet, so drop your thoughts about Griffith's campaign for existential domination down in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Marvelous Anime for more Berserk content, and we'll see you guys real soon with yet another video. Until then, stay safe, and as always, keep on struggling, strugglers.